Hey, I'm eating a peanut butter cracker, and we got more team previews right now. This one's a Dallas Fuel for 2022. I'm joined by the usual beautiful crew. Custa, Sideshow, Reinforced. They're not that usual, but they're useful for today. And sorry, it's a lot of peanut butter. It's coming out my mouth. I feel like one of those dogs, you know, when like the dog eats the peanut butter, it's like that's me right now. Well, let's talk Dallas. So Dallas just came off a great season. This is probably the year where Dallas fans, for the first time, felt what it was like to not have your dick flattened permanently. It was in 2021. Like, they finally had a 3-dimensional dick versus the usual 2D dick. So I think that's pretty good. And they want to lead into that. And they're like, okay, let's continue to not have our nether regions put into a vice for the Overwatch League. So let's talk about that for 2022 here. And when we look at this team and the expectations here and their overall roster, it's mostly the same. It's just they've gotten like 2 rookies, and they've also added Edison from the Reign. So let's kind of focus in on that area first. Let's start with their DPS line. So how are we feeling about the DPS line, the addition of Edison, the addition of Guerrillo? Like, what are we thinking?
Well, it was a big conversation topic last year as to they definitely had like a piece missing, which was who was going to play Tracer for them, essentially. Wasn't that the thing that we were all discussing at the beginning of the year? And then
Hitscan, yeah.
Well, yeah, when XC wasn't able to play with them anymore, then it was absolutely, yeah, who the hell's going to be playing Hitscan? So they've solved they've kind of thrown a couple of Hitscan players in there.
And Tracer players.
Edison's played Tracer in the past?
Yeah. Edison can play Tracer. Edison's also a pretty flexible Tracer, Hitscan type of player, so.
You know? Wasn't that like a conversation before, like Baby Bay versus Edison? Or am I misremembering? Was that pretty much only Baby Bay and then Edison plays Tracer?
I mean, honestly, that might have been a conversation, but my brain is mush, so I can't remember.
I remember Erster was a part of that conversation as well when he was like, because this is on like Atlanta, like 2019, 2020.
Yeah, but Erster was like almost exclusively like
didn't really happen.
Projectile DPS. So
this DPS line is kind of stupid. Like, it really is. It's a bit unfair. Like,
in a good way. You would say it's dumb in a good way.
It's stupid good.
Okay.
It's good stupid. Doa and Sparkle. I mean, already. Like, what do we need to say no more? Like, do we need to clarify here what Doa and Sparkle mean to the Dallas Fuel?
I mean, when we were worried about Tracer, I mean, Sparkle's already proven that he can play Tracer at a high level too.
Yeah.
So like they essentially now have 3 Tracer players on this roster.
Yeah. I mean, I almost think it's a worthy conversation. Like, would you rather have Edison play Tracer over Sparkle? Like, Sparkle at some points was just like so good that like, why would you want to swap out such a like personable and figure in your team that's so like recognizable and maybe like instrumental to that team? Would you just want to like, hey, we're gonna put in Edison now? Like, is he really going to be like magnitudes better on the Tracer to the point where he's maybe worth integrating? I don't know. Maybe there are certain metas you can do that. But overall, like, this is such a stupid DPS lineup now because they have literally everything. So I've watched quite a bit of Guerrillo when he played in Contenders. And he sort of feels like the XC slot before XC had to retire because of back issues last year. Like, he feels the long-range hit scan kind of role for this team. And if I had to like evaluate him compared to other hit scan players, I wouldn't say that he is as good as XC was during his time on Paris with like the McCree, the Ash, because like XC at the time, like, he was a beast. Like, he was able to just like get 3Ks, 4Ks on Cassidy and Ash heroes like these and just like take over games. And you could really put in resources into XC like that. I don't think you can do the same thing with Guerrillo necessarily. I think he's a very competent long-range hit scan player. The team he was on, Team Diamond, GC Basan, when I was watching them, it felt like they mostly tried to play around their like tanks and supports. Like, they were putting a lot of resources like Nanoboost and stuff into their Zarya, into their Winston, because there were so many good DPS players in Korean Contenders, essentially, with like Heesang, the proper, like, it's hard to win like the DPS matchup, like Stalker here on Genji. It's hard to win that DPS matchup, and I don't really rate Becky that highly. And so for TDI here, they may basically just like put a lot of resources into Inhawk on the Winston or Silvercoin on the Zarya, and it felt like that was the way they were trying to win a lot of these games. But Guerrillo, he wasn't able to like pop off in some of these fights. Like, the tanks made space, and Guerrillo was able to bring some of its hit scan capability. But I don't think he's quite on the same level as some of the upper echelon kind of Korean long-range hit scan players. But, you know, going back to the Dallas Fuel, I think he's going to fill that role really well. I mean, based on like how good the tanks and supports are for Dallas, I think he's going to get that space, and he'll fill the long range hit scan kind of role. And at that point, you're just like the Dallas Fuel. They have like freaking everything. Like they just have every DPS player you could possibly want on your team, and they're all great. Like they're all good.
Okay, let me voice my concern with this DPS lineup, because I think it's very good. I agree. If you look at them, like if you can merge all 4 players into 2 players, I would be very, very excited. But my fear is that we're going to see this team just end up playing Doha Sparkle because of like their history and their experience as a team. And I'm a little worried that Gurio isn't this like superstar pickup that like out of like this rookie season. He's solid, and he should be able to fit that hit scan role if they need to play it. And Edison, I feel like Edison hasn't shown us exceptional play in a while. I don't, Avast, I think, has said that he was like underutilized, I think, by, the Atlanta Reign, and we haven't really seen his true power in a while. But something in the back of my mind just makes me think that we're just going to see Doha Sparkle, and they're just going to try and like make it work unless we're in a hard hit scan meta. So theoretically, I agree the 4 DPS are great, but it doesn't feel like they have that power of like a Lip Fletter or a Prophet Fitz. Obviously, those are the greatest, but they're 2 players that fill everything very well. I think they're 4 players that fill everything very well, and I think that can be hard to manage at times.
I also think back to the conversation that we were having last year in 2021 when we were saying, would Dallas have even had that level of success had they kept Exi on the roster and wanted to field him at various points? And I think my answer at the time was they wouldn't have had that level of success. And also, even though it's not replicable, right? You can't just go into next season and say, well, we figured it out last year, we'll figure it out again. It makes sense that they're taking steps to try and remedy it. But I'm concerned that their steps are actually going to put them in potentially a worse position. Because unless you really believe in Gurio, unless you think this guy's a hidden gem, like a diamond in the rough that they've plucked out of Korean contenders, because he's not a big name. Yeah, there you go. He's not a big name, but if you really believe in him, then okay, I can see why you'd have a lot of faith in this DPS line. But otherwise, there are so many good hit scan players out there in the league right now. I was just looking through it, and I was trying to put some kind of list together in my head. I'm thinking about Edison Gurio as a hit scan lineup that they have access to. I think it might be somewhere just above bottom 5 in the league. And I know that sounds horrendously harsh, but guys, there are some unreal hit scan players in the league right now. And when you measure them head to head, it's really hard to justify putting this Dallas Fuel lineup above that many people. There's somewhere like 5 to 10th at the bottom. So like, that's like what bottom, like the what do you even call that, like second quartile or something, like that's the range. I think the hit scan lineup to me looks under average right now for a team that surely has championship aspirations, having got 3rd last year and are hoping to have solved some of the holes that they identified. But there's just so many good DPS lineups out there that I can't justify putting them above even average.
So is it mostly we're stuck on, because the Doha Sparkle portion seems like, okay, everyone's cool, but we're stuck on still the hit scan portion of this lineup with the
I'm talking specifically hit scan. I'm not saying the DPS lineup in general, but the hit scan lineup. I mean, you are going up against
do you feel like you're
outrageous talents.
Do you feel like you might be, in my personal opinion, I think a lot of this rides on what is Edison's role in this team. Like, where does Edison fit? Because Edison coming into Overwatch League, if I remember, people thought Edison was like going to fucking dominate Overwatch League when he entered the league. Like, people were extremely hyped for the interest of Edison. I was hyped for the interest of Edison. He was on GC Busan previously, and he was fucking rolling in Korean contenders. And he came in, and he's been kind of, I think he had like a really good year, didn't he? And then then his past year, he's been like almost off the radar entirely, right? Am I misremembering that?
I don't think he came in and had a really good year.
I'm trying to remember what his whole like trajectory has been so far. But
he came in and he played over Erster, and everyone was like, "Why is Edison playing over Erster?"
Yeah, that's what it was. It was like the Erster situation and that whole problem where then Erster eventually
but it wasn't even like it wasn't even like he was lighting the world on fire, and he's been a good player.
He's been solid. And then this past year, he's also been kind of absent for large portions of the year and then like coming back and been good, you know.
Yeah,
So it's like,
I mean, he was fielded occasionally, but also just didn't look amazing.
so he's never really lived up to that potential, I feel like, coming from GZ Busan to here. So to me, I'm like, when I look at the hit scan issue, a lot of this and also the flexibility issue, because that's the big thing for me, right? For Fuel is, like you talked about, is that they're worried about, or was it Johnny talked about, like they're worried they're just going to run Doha Sparkle the whole time again, because they have this synergy, they do really well, but like their flexibility is kind of meh, even though Sparkle has learned how to play Tracer. So it's like, to me, I look at Garayo, I'm like, okay, this is a rookie you can mold. Maybe we'll do well. Like maybe it's a diamond in the rough from Team Diamond. But Edison is a player that had a history of being really, really fucking good at hit scan and playing Tracer really well. And then has never really like has played like a bunch of shit. Has played like May for the Rain. Has played like all this weird shit on top of the stuff of playing over Erster. So I'm like hoping that this could be a return to Edison, maybe like fulfilling that dream. Because if Edison can hit his stride here and like fulfill his Korean contenders like glory days, or at least get close to that, I feel like their problems in the DPS line are a bit more solved.
Yeah, and that also counts for Gurio as well. If Rush can do an incredible job with one of those two players, it doesn't even have to be both of them, of course. It could just be one of them. If Rush can really turn one of them into the talent that they look like they have had the potential to be, you know, you could take the absolute best out of Gurio, or you could take Edison back to his potential that you saw in Contenders and work off of that, then of course this DPS line is going to be way better than I'm anticipating it to be. But I think that's kind of sniffing the Dallas hopium a bit, rather than really asking for like what is the most reasonable outcome. Because I even think last year was a bit of an unreasonable outcome for Dallas. Like that was last year, what they were able to achieve was quite extraordinary, and you can't expect that every time. Perform more than expected.
Okay, well, I think one thing that I actually like about this Dallas Fuel team is that they're not really losing anything. You look at a lot of these other teams in the North American region, and it's like they're rebuilding. They're rebuilding, and they got all like the right puzzle pieces, but now they have to put it together. And that is a massive task in and of itself. You have a lot of these teams, whether it's the San Francisco Shock, the Houston Outlaws, the New York Excelsior, who are going to be the ones competing for those top spots. They're missing players at certain roles. They'll have to figure out like how their support lineups work, how their tank lineups work, what maps they want to play, what compositions they want to play. Dallas Fuel, they don't have that problem. They have a system. They have fantastic players at every role. And if anything, I think like players like Gurio, towards the end of the season, I might look like a fool on this episode, because I'm kind of like underrating him and saying that it really didn't stood out. But like he was playing on like an 8th, 6th to 7th kind of best team in Korean contenders. Like that was not a great team. That was not a great environment for Gurio to shine. But if you told me that like this year that Gurio is going to be this season skewed and just turn into something different on a fantastic team and come into himself, that's an underdog that I could see myself betting on, to just turn his.
I mean, he'd also have to swap roles, though. He'd have to swap. From DPS
but in terms of like the glow up, because skewed were like, why the hell is skewed on the Gladiators? Like, what is this guy doing here? And he turned out to be like one of the best brigs in the league. I could see Gurio coming into this system, being surrounded by these tank players, these support players, and have a bit of a glow up and just be like, yo, I'm one of the best long range hit scan players in the league. And I could definitely see that for a team like Dallas Fuel, who already have it figured out. And going into Overwatch 2, they just have to figure out how to implement their structure and the way they think about the game into Overwatch 2. And that is a lot easier than doing that while you're trying to figure out how a roster works, the dynamics of that roster, how the roles work within that roster, and everything previous. Like, I think Dallas Fuel are set up to have another great season in that regard.
I want to jump in because I really like what Josh said about, I'm a little worried that they're going to try and like, I agree, Johnny, that if like these players like can really hit those like levels, and like Gurio could be there. But here's my problem. As you said, Gurio came from an 8th team. He is by no means like one of the best prospects. And Edison is like, he was great 3 years ago. How many players have we seen come to the league, have 3 years of average play, and then all of a sudden hit a new peak? Like, I feel like that's going to be a very hard thing to achieve. And I think I'm worried for the Dallas Fuel that they're going to try and shoehorn these guys into the playing lineup and not just play Doha Sparkle, and that's going to hurt them in the long run, because that's a recipe that they know works, even though if it has weaknesses.
Okay, but wouldn't you want that though? Wouldn't you want to at least shoehorn them in to give them some gameplay experience?
No, absolutely. But that doesn't mean that it might not have a negative effect. Like, they would win more games if they didn't shoehorn the players. They probably would be, they would have the same issue that they had this year, where they won a lot of games and they won some stages and that kind of stuff. But when they went to the playoffs, nobody believed that they were a well-rounded enough team to beat the Shanghai Dragons. Maybe with Gurio or Edison, if they hit that peak, I can see it. They have so much talent on their roster. They could hit that peak that they could be the best team in the world. So it is good that they've made these additions. These are just my concerns for these two players.
Yeah, I also think. Sorry, I also think that the DPS line is the worst thing going for them, in my opinion. The rest of their team is looking pretty fucking good.
Yeah, I mean, let's move on then, because I kind of do agree with that take. Let's then start with, like, of course, the tanks. I mean, you have Hanbin Fearless. Is there much to say about that? Like, especially considering that Fearless rounded out his play, I think, significantly as the season went on. Like, when we were like, oh, he only plays Winston, and we saw more and more of his ball, like, moving forward from that. Like, we've seen Ryan from him in the past. Like, I feel like, to me, when you look at also the addition of Hanbin, when you look at like teams like Shock that they only have Kalush, right? Or teams where they only have one tank. Like, I mean, I don't know why I was going to bring up the Titans, because, like, that's not even relevant, but, they only have one tank, but it's like still, like, it's still, I don't know why I was going to bring up obviously the other example of one tank, but they only have they have two great tanks that they can cover both main tank and off tank.
I think this might be the best tank line heading into Overwatch 2. I think this is, I have more confidence in Hanbin Fearless even than I do with Fate and Void.
Really?
I think so. For Overwatch 2.
What's the reasoning?
My reasoning being that I think the individual ability for both of these players on their own, not just playing together, is absurdly good. They are two of the most talented players in their roles. And whereas when we're thinking about Shanghai, there are some concerns about, like, how good Fate would be just completely on his own, or how good are they going to be without Fate's leadership. Those kind of concerns don't worry me at all when it comes to the Dallas Fuel. I think they would be insanely good with either of these players playing the solo tank for the team. And I haven't really seen... I guess you could look at, like, what would Fearless do if he had to play ball, I guess, or
his ball was fine, like, when he played it, right? Like even when he played, it wasn't Fate, but he showed that he can play it to a respectable degree, right?
It didn't look great when he first brought it out, but by the end of the season, I thought he looked really good at it. And so, if that ended up being the meta, then yeah, just give him a while, and I think he'd be okay. What else are you really concerned about? Like Hog or Doom or something? Yeah, I'm concerned about that for everyone.
Yeah. I mean, Hog and Doom, like, it's a big question mark for everyone. But let me ask you this question. I don't think this is true. This is a question. But would you see them perhaps struggling if the meta were to slow down a bit, considering how successful they were last year in playing, like, rush styles, like playing fast Lucio Moira with Winston, playing fast with Reinhardt, Symmetra, and that's how they shocked a lot of these teams who were like, I don't know how to counter the last real aggression. Like, they just run at us and we can't deal with it. Would you perhaps be a bit wary if it was like, hey, this meta slows down, it's going to be like them playing very slow around, like, Widowmakers, and Hanbin has to play like a very safe diva, utilize like self defense matrix, stuff like that? Would that be a point of, like, that goes against what they were so good at last year that you could see them struggling a bit this year? It's just a question.
Sorry, I lagged out there for a second, so I wasn't able to respond. But my response to that would be that I think Hanbin is not a particularly hyper-aggressive diva player anyway, so I'd be pretty comfortable with him having to play a little bit of a slower style. And Fearless's Winston is not always an all-in style either. Obviously, he has been playing that with the metas that were relevant in 2021, but that double bubble kind of composition required a huge amount of patience to be able to maximize your value in that sense, about, always being able to take the small engage, the, like, mini dive, and then build up your nano boosts and go for the big engage. Like, these aren't dumb players. They're not just all-in hyper aggro players. I think I don't have personally any concerns there, other than, like, a team identity kind of question or like a meta question, but that's more to do with the team and how they approach things as a unit rather than the strengths of the tanks.
Okay. I completely agree.
Okay, so it seems like the tank line, we're all in agreement. They look pretty good. I think overall, like, they've got the bases covered over the tank line. Definitely a lot more complete looking, and there's less question marks about, like, what tank you put in where than the DPS. So then support, they've kept Fielder, who had a very good 2021 season, and then they've added Chio. And Jexa is no longer on the roster, and Chio is there to kind of from O2 Blast to kind of step in for that Lucio Mercy like Brigida role. What are our thoughts then on the back line, considering Fielder remained the same? It's just really they've added Chio.
I really like the addition of Chio. I think he was one of the the main supports that was like, it wasn't of is he going to get signed to the league, it's who was going to sign him. I think Dallas did a great job of picking him up. I didn't really see a problem with Jexe for the Dallas Fuel. I actually really like Jexe's play. It wasn't Lee J Gon level of effectiveness at times, but I think he was really solid. But this is probably a player that's coming in, and I would expect a higher ceiling from Chio, and I think he's going to be able to hit that Jexe level. So I think it is just a straight up upgrade, most probably, right? You never know with a rookie, but Fielder's been playing great. Chio seems to have a good, he has good looks coming under his name. He can play all the main supports. I don't know how flexible he is, if he need to play the flex support on top of that as well. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think he's pretty sure he's the second best main support coming out of Korea after Churong. I would say Churong is probably the best main support coming out, but then it's like Chio. Obviously, like Vigilante is a flex support, but and then straight upgrade from Jexe. I'd agree with Custa in that regard. Sorry,
Super Rich coming out of China as well.
Super Rich coming out of China. Chio is really good. I think he's a straight upgrade over Jexe. And you might say like, don't fix what isn't broken, because that support line was fine. But this is just like a better talent to bet on. Like if you want to begin in 3 years, you'd rather have Chio than Jexe.
Yeah, I mean, do we have any concerns about so really there's no real flexibility concerns other than does Chio, can he potentially flex the flex support? Because they don't have a double flex support here. If they had a meta for a double flex
that's
support.
The only thing is the double flex support question. It would be kind of good for Dallas Fuel to just grab a cracked Zen player. I know that Connor in particular, very happy with Fielder's Zen play.
I thought his Zen was good, so yeah.
but I would just like to see that there are some players in the league that just specialize in Zen. Zen has been a character that a lot of people have been, it's at the top of their hero pool when they're a flex support. So there had to be people available in the offseason. I know that they were. They ended up going to other teams where you could have bolstered this backline and taken some of the pressure off both Fielder and Chio to perform in those kind of metas. I would have liked to see that, but otherwise, Fielder's a beast, man. Yeah. I don't know how this guy it seems like anyway that he keeps getting underrated. People didn't think that he was going to be an exceptional elite talent heading into last year, and he just is. He just fucking is. He's nasty good. He's just blowing people away when it comes to genuine supporting, like being in a perfect position where he can't be punished, and he's providing massive amounts of heals to the rest of his team, and happy to fend for himself if required.
He plays everything as well.
Yeah,
Moira, he's happy to play Moira, which is a big part of contest for a lot of flex supports, or like Ana and that kind of stuff. I think we've seen Fielder play Ana, Zen, Bap, and Moira at this point, all to a degree where I'd be like, yeah, fuck it, sign me up. I'm like down to have Fielder on my team. He doesn't have a glaring weakness as a flex support. Like, I agree that they need like the Bebe of the Shanghai Dragons, that guy that you just give money to and you're like, in case of double flex support, break Bebe glass. And then he comes out and he's like, hey guys, how's it going? Like, that's what they need. Someone who is willing to sign a contract that can just sort of exist on the roster, but is unlikely to play.
Get yourself back in there.
Yeah, oh yeah, Dallas. Tasmo, if you see me, I've been playing a lot of Zen on the ladder. Yeah, I'll do it.
It could be the coming home arc for Custa.
Coming home arc. They could probably assign the flex support that Gurio played with on Team Diamond. I've been talking this guy up a bit. His name is Quasid. He's a flex support in Korean Contender for Team Diamond.
Yeah,
Quasid is good. I think he primarily played mostly Ana, so you'd probably be like that. He competes with Fielder a little bit.
Yeah, I mean that'd be a tough sell, right? Yeah.
But mechanically, this guy is good. Like I think Quasid is just like an inevitability before he's in the league. So if you're like, we foresee us potentially struggling with double flex support, like just pick the guy up and maybe offload him in like a year to another team if you can. So that'd be someone I'd shout out as a potential pickup if that. But there are other teams that might need his abilities instead.
Custa, what are you gasping for?
Sorry, news just came out. The Criv just got signed to the Florida Mayhem.
Oh really?
Let's go!
Well, this is gonna bring on Saturday, I think, or Friday. So in like 5 days.
Sorry.
Yeah, I mean,
I got out. Sorry, I wasn't gonna say anything, and then you called me out. Sorry about that.
Yeah, I thought when you gasp audibly, you want to say something generally, but either way. So let's then do a holistic review of the team. I feel like overall our agreement is this team is looking really good. Their tank line looks some of the most prepared tank line heading into Overwatch 2. Their back line looks very good. They've arguably made an upgrade over Jaxa with Chio. It's just they have the actual mixed signals. What the fuck am I, like, who am I playing DPS line still with the Doha Sparkle and now like Edison, Guerrillo, like can they actually fill that hit scan role for them? Most importantly, can they fill the hit scan role and also the tracer role to the point where they'd rather be playing them over like Sparkle, and can they get away from that Sparkle Doha identity, right? That seems to be the overall look, I'd say, for them. It's just a DPS mixed signal type of team. And if that's the case, do we think with these new additions and heading to Overwatch 2 that they're going to be performing better, similar, worse than they did last year?
I think last year, if you look at last year's performance, some of that has to be tied into the meta and the fact that they were able to not only like be first to play it, but also like dominate on it with the Lucio Moira compositions. I think part of their season has to be attributed to that meta being enabled. But going into this season, I still think they are probably from the start of the season, you have to consider them like the favorite to win North America. I don't think there's any outside teams that you could justifiably be like, actually, I think it'll be better than Dallas Fuel. I think if you did that, you'd be a bit cheeky to do that and predict another team being number 1 in NA over Dallas Fuel. These guys are not going to forget how to play the game. They're going to go into the server. They're going to be aggressive. They're going to be dominant. They're going to be fearless. No pun intended. And they're just going to try to shock some of these other teams. I really do have faith that Dallas Fuel are going to continue to be a top tier team in NA.
I think there's more variance than last year. I think, like, as much as I agree that Johnny's like, this team is not drastically different to last year. If anything, they've plugged a couple of holes. But I think the entire league has upgraded since last season. And I think especially a lot of like the bottom end, I think that there is potential that if Dallas stumble early or like they just don't find a great grasp of the meta, they can lose to a lot of middle of the pack
but
teams.
Custa, no, look, we gotta make entertainment of this show, okay? You can't say that about every team in NA because this is every team in NA. Like, oh, they're rebuilding, oh, they don't have a main support, they don't have a main tank, they don't have an off tank. Like Dallas Fuel, they have it all, and they're super successful. They have to be one of the consistent teams, right?
I think they are. I would say they are not easily, because the way you're putting it, and this is what I can't get behind, is you're like they are top of NA. Like they are number 1 in NA. I can't get in that boat. Like I think there are a lot of teams that can just be straight up better than them. As much as they were great last year, I think a lot of that was based off of. Sorry.
There can't be a lot of teams in NA that could be better.
Well, I think there are 4 or 5. Like we've talked about Atlanta Reign. I think Atlanta Reign could be better than Dallas Fuel. I think there is a world in which Atlanta Reign is better than Dallas Fuel.
I'll give you that. I'll even throw you in the LA Gladiators. Yeah. Now who?
Yeah, I think Shock, if the rookies play to the performance, I think Shock can be better than Dallas. Obviously,
okay, so we have 4, and then
so many ifs. What if Aspire and Shockwave is the best DPS duo in the league?
Like, what's it? Oh, London Spitfire, right? We got to maybe London Spitfire in there too. Got to throw them in there.
The Revenge of Hardy.
There are 3 or 4 teams right there that have the potential. Like, they are not a sure lock-in for number 1 in NA in the same way that we think about the Shanghai Dragons in the APAC region. No, I don't believe that is the thing.
I get that. But if we're making the power Plat Chat, the infamous Plat Chat power rankings, like the first week before the season, you put Dallas Fuel at number 1.
No, I wouldn't.
I actually don't.
You would put Gladiators above them because there's no way you're putting Atlanta without Speedlink to law.
We can't get into a power ranking discussion right now because that would be where we don't have enough time.
But I'm just trying to facilitate this conversation because you're all just presenting so many what ifs, and I think you're cowards.
I believe in the fuel. I'm going to be honest. I kind of believe in the fuel, but for reasons that have nothing to do with like pure player quality and hero pool, but because. When I look at last year, I look at a team, and it matters a lot heading to Overwatch 2, first year of Overwatch 2 here. You saw a team that MacGyvered their way out of situations with a hero pool that made no fucking sense the majority of the time. And I head to Overwatch 2, and you need to likely be extremely flexible with like how you're swapping up, like you're going to have to play the game, what roles, what like heroes you need to be playing at that time. And when I look at Dallas' performance last year and how they're willing to like
bro, like we have no fucking hit scan. Wait a minute. Sparkle Soldier. And like actually the Soldier was good. It was like cool the way they utilized it. Like they did like the things that they pulled out and were willing to try. I think that flexibility to me and the willingness for the team to be like, we need to try something different and also succeed on it, do something cool with it, gives me hope and confidence that kind of alleviates the hero pool problems for the Fuel heading into Overwatch 2, which is that's been the big reason I have belief in Dallas Fuel.
I would be willing to say top 3 North America is pretty much guaranteed for this team, and top 5 overall. And I'm not even really willing to sign on to the idea that they could slip lower than that. I really do think they're kind of a lock for that level of like top performance. But in terms of being the favorite in North America, it's just there are teams that I think could peak higher. And I think it's not just they could peak higher. I think there are teams that are likely to peak higher. I'm high on the Gladiators, man. I really am. I'm not on board with your Gladiators doubting. I can't get behind it, Jonathan. I understand you're a Gladiators doubter, but I believe in that team.
I also think that Fuel we're heavily underrating. Like if because also we're saying what ifs, like what if they don't do it? But if Edison or Garayo like pop the fuck off, like Fuel are now like they're looking incredible. You know, like. So there are some what ifs that also run the positive direction for this team.
I mean, what if Ans plays like he did in 2020? I mean, then I'm up for the Gladiators, man. What if Parifan turns out to be this, great talent, transitioning perfectly, seamlessly from Valorant? I'm in on
I think that's much more likely. I think it's more likely that Arns is prayer form or Paddy Pan comes back and is just a good player at Overwatch because he has been in the past and he is obviously just a very talented individual at video games. Like, I think it's more likely that those players come up and hit that high tier performance that they need to hit than 2 players who have never even been close to that.
Okay, we need to lock in a range here to the round out. Lock in what's our Dallas Fuel? Where are Dallas Fuel fans expecting to land for next year? Where should they be?
Lock in top 3 and just
top 3. I think is guaranteed. Yeah,
top 3.
Top 3.
Top 3.
Are you saying top 3 overall? Because I said top 5 overall. I was willing to give them the same as Atlanta, but like more confidently than.
I think top 3 and A, top 5 overall are both like fair. Like I think those are fair because there's still a lot of variability, but like they're looking poised. Like even if their hit scans are a flop, they should still be a top team realistically.
Yes,
realistically, they should still be a team. All right, well, there's the Dallas Fuel. You could be on Copium. You could be on Hopium. It's like your Copium's like, oh, like we're gonna definitely be the best team. Your Hopium is like we're definitely gonna be the best team. So just depends on like how you want to say it heading into the next season for sure. But you still be positive. So for the Dallas Fuel, so that was another one of the recaps here. The team breakdowns this time with Dallas Fuel. Let us know if maybe we're just dumb and actually their hit scans are gonna pound and just whatever me. At me on Twitter. Actually, don't at me on Twitter. I believe in the Fuel. At other people that don't believe in the Fuel on Twitter. So at them. And that's it. Let's see it. Let's close it out. See you guys next time.